Welcome to the Bare Marriage Podcast. I'm Sheila Ray Gregoire from baremarriage.com, where we like to help you get the marriage you want through healthy, evidence-based biblical advice for your sex life and your marriage. And I am joined today by my husband and co-author of The Marriage You Want, Keith.
Hey, everybody.
And we're just having fun going through this book.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's The Marriage You Want is out March 11th, and our launch team is up and running. It's not too late to join those, so if you've pre-ordered, just send in your pre-order receipt to preorder@marriageyouwantbook.com. The link is in the podcast notes as well. And you can be part of that, get access to the book right away, start reading it. We just ask you to write an honest review, so super fun. And before we get started today, I just wanted to say a special thank you to another group online that makes my life wonderful, which is our patron group. Our patrons support us on a monthly basis, and for as little as $5 a month, and then they get access to our exclusive patron Facebook group where we have tons of posts every week.
Oh yeah,
and for
it's very busy.
For this podcast in particular, I brainstormed with them.
Right.
I said, hey, I need some ideas for this, and I got a bunch of ideas of examples. So yeah, my patron group is just really good for me for that, and is just really supportive. So come on over and join that. And of course, we would also like to give a donation to the work that we do in researching. You can give that through the Good Fruit Faith Initiative of the Bosco Foundation, and it is tax receivable within the United States. So all those links are in the podcast notes. And today we are going to talk about chapter 2 of The Marriage You Want. We're not going through the whole book on this podcast. We are in the pre-order launch team. But there's certain things that I thought were so important to talk about. And today we want to talk about why compromise isn't necessarily the answer in marriage. And how sometimes the idea that we just need to compromise and figure out what each other needs can actually hinder marital intimacy and marital satisfaction. And that's what we found in our research for The Marriage You Want. And we want to explain what we mean by that today. And to start off, I want to play a clip from Emerson Eggerichs.
Yeah, because I think it sort of typifies the evangelical marriage response, which is very much this idea of find a compromise.
Yes.
You know, figure out what you each need from each other and then give it to each other, and that will be the compromise.
Yeah. Like the love languages. What love language does he have? What does he have?
His
what
needs,
love
her
language?
needs.
Yeah, you just meet each other's primary need and then you're fine. But that doesn't always work. And so I want to play this clip. So this is from a podcast that Emerson Eggerichs did in 2014. He stopped his podcast in 2016 after, 100 odd of episodes. And for research purposes for another podcast series we're doing, I've been listening to some of them. And I came across this one, which I thought was actually quite funny. So it's an entire 35 minutes of him saying nothing else but being angry at women for hijacking the conversation.
Yes.
So to set up what happened, he had been posting on social media about how men need to love their wives and give sacrificially to their wives. And that went huge. Women really liked it. But then he followed that up with, hey, women, you need to give your husbands unconditional respect, even in an argument or something like that. And all kinds of women did not like that.
Yeah.
And really hijacked the conversation, in his words.
Yeah. Because they were not having it.
Right.
And so he needed to rant for 35 minutes about how women are unteachable and need to
Yes.
how unfair they are.
Yeah. And so I just want to play, I can pull out so many clips from this. It's actually quite interesting, his attitude towards this, but I want to pull out one clip. Okay. So this just kind of sets the stage for it all.
Understood. But what we do is we give the women a pass because we know that they are virtuous and caring. We see most women like our mothers, like our sister. And so we don't necessarily challenge this. But here's what happens. When these conversations are hijacked like this, where suddenly it goes from the man's need to, hey, what about us women? And then launching into the women, men leave the discussion. They don't stay engaged with it. They just go watch a sports program because men really like sports. They just simply push eject. And this is what's going to happen with our sons, our brothers, our uncles. And we can say all day along that men ought not to push eject, that men ought to be empathetic. But just as women are saying, hey, we're non-existent when you make a statement that men need respect, and we're going to put ourselves back on the marital radar screen, we in effect then are making the man non-existent. And the men don't typically jump back in and say, whoa, time out. We need to, what about us? Men, because what happens then it gets countered even more. So what's happening is men are just giving up on these conversation.
All right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let me get this straight, because I haven't listened to the podcast that you listened
The
to.
whole thing.
So except for these clips, this clip you played me. So basically, he does a series on how husbands need to love their wives, and the women are all like, "Yes, this is good." And then he goes on and says, "Women need to Emerson Eggerichs definition of respect to their husbands."
Right.
And then they're upset with him,
Yeah.
and he's saying, "Oh, you're there for your side of it, but you don't want to give your part of it. And so you're selfish and unfair." That's what he's basically saying, right? Okay. And at no point does he stop to think that maybe that means he's presenting unfair, like an unfair deal.
Yeah, well, and that certainly is a point.
Yeah.
But I think when we hear his basic argument, and throughout the podcast, he actually sounds quite reasonable.
Yes.
I will say that he sounds quite reasonable, because his point is, look, ladies, like, we told men what you needed, and now we're telling you what men need.
Yeah.
Why aren't you willing to listen to that?
Right.
We can't have this double standard here, and you need to, and that sounds like a reasonable argument.
Yes.
It really does. But I think it's indicative of a big mistake
Right.
that we often make when it comes to marriage counseling and marriage advice, is we think the answer to any marriage problem is to figure out what he needs, and then figure out what she needs, and then you each just meet the need. So whatever you both think you need, let's just meet it. But that can actually go awry.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to talk about today, is how compromise, how this idea of, well, I need this and you need this, so we're just going to meet it, doesn't always work if you're starting from the wrong foundation. Yeah. And compromise, if you're not having equal asks of each other, is not a true compromise.
Right.
And really doesn't work and doesn't build intimacy in your marriage. And this is something we actually saw in our data for the marriage you want. And when you dig deeper, is that quite often what was going on is that one person was putting in more effort than the other. And so,
Or starting from a position
Yeah.
where they had it better to start with.
right.
And then they were
Right.
asking for more.
Yes.
While the other person was barely treading water.
Yes.
And they were being asked to give more to the person who was standing up on the rock above them.
Exactly.
Right?
And so what if the situation is not as simple as Emerson Eggerichs is making it out to be? And to give you an example, I want to go to another person who pretty much sees the world the same as Emerson Eggerichs, and that is Kevin Lehman.
Yeah. And certainly has the same evangelical mindset. We talked about the 2 podcasts ago. We talked about the 5 things that all marriage books, evangelical marriage books say. They're in Emerson Eggerichs' words, and they're in Lehman's books too, right? Like, so those same concepts. So
this is how Kevin Lehman opens his book, Sheet Music. This is on page 6. So it's like at the very, very beginning of his book. So this is one of the foundational stories that will set the tone. Stage, for everything else that follows. Okay. So he's talking about, and we've talked about this story before on the podcast, but I want to do a deep dive here. He's talking about a couple named Mark and Brenda, who used to have a really fun marriage, and then they had kids, and Mark's job was really stressful, and he really needed Brenda to understand how stressful his job was, and he'd had a really bad day at work, and really wanted to reach out to her, and he just feeling like that they were just roommates now, okay? And so then Lehman writes, deciding to make a change, Mark called Brenda and confessed, "I've had a really crummy day. Can we just go out tonight?" It was an emotional cry from Mark, even more than a physical one, but Brenda didn't understand. She'd had a rushed day herself, and because she'd lost touch with her husband and wasn't able to read the emotion in his request, she responded with a curt, "Mark, it's 5 o'clock. I can't get babysitter this late. What are you thinking? You never give me any notice." Okay, I just want to say that that's actually valid.
Of course.
Like, trying to get a babysitter at the last minute isn't easy.
Well, and you can have a need, but like that, this is a whole other podcast. But like, if I have a need, I expect you to take care of every single part of that need. Like, if I need to go out for dinner tonight, then there's things that need to happen. Maybe I should take some ownership of that. But whatever, it's another podcast.
Yeah. So so Lehman is saying she's not responding to Mark's need, but like, why didn't Mark make babysitting arrangements then?
If he needs it that bad,
Exactly.
But whatever. So,
yeah. Mark wanted to tell Brenda that he missed her. He longed for her to be the eager woman she used to be, who was willing to cut classes to fool around for a little bit. But he had already stuck out his neck once today, and look where that got him. So he went on the defensive. "Oh, forget it," he said, and he hung up the phone. Mark stopped at a pub on the way home and shot pool until 11 p.m. He knew he would...
Okay. Sorry. Okay, I gotta beep, back the truck up. So this is the thing is there's no concept of like how we have to take ownership of stuff. Like poor Mark.
Yeah.
That he abandoned his family till 11 p.m.
Yeah.
That he's never called on that.
No,
Anyway.
no. Oh, it gets better. He knew he'd catch a lot of flack from Brenda for being out so late, but she didn't understand.
Okay, so
the pressure
catch
he
flack
was
from
under.
Brenda.
Yeah.
Mark knew that as a husband and father, he had responsibilities to his family to be present, so he didn't stay out till 11 p.m. shooting pool. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry. I keep it up to your story. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, this is good. It's all good. Ready for the next sentence?
Yeah.
Brenda also didn't understand that Mark masturbated 2 or 3 times a week, and every time he did so, he felt his desire for Brenda as a person decline just a little bit more.
Yeah.
He was tired of being reluctantly accommodated and never pursued. Poor Mark.
Yeah, I know.
Forced to masturbate.
We talked about this before too, right? It's like so again, he's being pitched as this poor person who's not getting his needs met, when a lot of these needs are number one, not legitimate, and number two, he should be taking care of things himself. He should be becoming a better person.
Yes.
Rather than relying on his wife to fix it for him.
Well, and then listen to this. For her part, Brenda was too busy with the kids to notice.
Yeah.
Because Brenda knew that she did not have the luxury of going and playing pool till 11 p.m.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
the kids relied on her.
Exactly.
But Mark had the luxury
Yeah.
of going and playing pool till 11
So
p.m.
again, they're not starting on equal footing.
Right.
Right.
In fact, she was actually thankful that Mark didn't pressure her for sex anymore. She was too tired to even think about it. It never occurred to her that Mark was taking matters into his own hands and was adept enough at hiding the porn on the computer that she never found it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And here is Lehman's conclusion, to this story, which we talked about in The Great Sex Rescue. Yeah. What Brenda didn't realize was how much this sexual winter was costing them as a couple. And how, if they didn't turn things around, they'd probably be divorced within another 5 years.
Yeah. And we've talked in previous podcasts about how this is the whole thing, is that the underlying message here is poor Mark. And what does Brenda think is going to happen here? And it's falling on Brenda to fix this problem instead of Mark taking responsibility for his own behavior. Okay, that's a totally different thing. We've talked about that before. But today, what we want to talk about is the whole idea of compromise. Because what's going to happen here? This is a classic evangelical Christian kind of scenario. And the compromise is, I know, Brenda, you don't want to have sex with him. I know you're exhausted with the kids. I know all this stuff. But he needs that. So can you compromise and give that to him so that he can maybe step up and do other things for you? Yeah. And then you'll compromise and you'll both be happier.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And that's what gets put forward as the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
And like, let's take a step back and look objectively about what's going on here. And again, Mark is living a life of luxury. He can go out for 6 hours after work and abandon the family. And he's worried he's going to catch flack when he gets home. Yeah. Right? And if she did that, Child Protection Service would be called. Yeah. Right? Exactly. She doesn't have that luxury, right? Yeah. She's drowning and he's wandering around on the solid ground above her going, oh, poor me, my life. Yeah. Yeah. Ridiculous.
Yeah. And he's watching porn. He's got a secret sexual life that she doesn't know about. And he's being deceitful and betraying her.
Yeah. And again, he's never called on this in the book.
No.
Her lack of availability is what's causing him to be like this.
Yeah, her sexual
And this
winter.
is what drives me crazy about people who talk about men are supposed to be the leaders. Like for people who believe men are supposed to be the leaders, they sure do a lot of following. It's the woman is setting the tempo and the pace for the relationship. If he's using porn, it's her fault. If he has an affair, it's her fault. If this happens, it's her fault. It's always her fault. Yeah. She's the leader then. Yeah. Like anyway, that was last week's podcast.
Yeah, if he wants to go out for dinner, then she should take care of everything. Yeah. You know.
And isn't it great that he thought about going out to dinner for them as a family?
Yeah.
That's what a leader he is.
Yeah.
So how many of you who are employed, who has a boss who comes in and says, hey, I need this done for tomorrow, something that takes 6 weeks to work. And the reason that it takes 6 weeks to get done, but you're supposed to have it done for tomorrow because your boss forgot to tell you 6 weeks ago it needed to be done. Yeah. How many of you think that's a good leader?
Yeah. Yeah. Right? No, it's crazy.
Crazy.
And again, as we said last week, we don't think the husband should be the leader anyway, and we would rather get rid of that word. But these people actually use the word, and they're still. But they're not. This is what they're saying, so it doesn't make any sense.
So how does this relate to compromise, Sheila?
Well, here's the point. when we're talking about how you each need to meet your own needs, that is each other's needs, that assumes that you're starting from an equal playing field. But let's say that in the marriage, she's working at 90%, or she's doing 90% of the work.
Or the other way around. He's doing 90% and she's only doing 10%.
Yeah, let's change it. Okay. So one of you is doing 90%, one of you is doing 10%. If the marriage counselor says, you know what, you each need to up your game. You each need to put in another 10%.
Yeah.
Right? Well, now she's doing 99% and he's doing 11%. And I know that doesn't add up to 100.
You get the concept. You get the concept.
Yeah.
Even if he doubles his effort and she only puts her effort up by like a couple of percent.
Yeah.
She's bearing more of the burden than she was before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is what Emerson Eggers didn't understand about that outrage from women. Mm-hmm. And this is why that entire podcast of him complaining about women really doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Because his assumption is that each of them have equal needs and need to listen.
Yeah.
But if the marriage is not starting from an equal plane, then telling her that she needs to understand his need for respect isn't right. And this is the big mindset shift we want people to make, okay? Uh-huh. Is if we want marriages to thrive, we need to stop asking, what does she need and what does he need? Yeah. And we need to start asking, what does the marriage need?
Correct.
What does the marriage need?
Yeah.
Because for Mark and Brenda, that answer would include Mark stopping watching pornography and Mark getting off of his butt and helping with the children.
Right? Absolutely.
Absolutely. Before we even start talking about sex, let's just get back to ground zero here. Okay.
Exactly. Because if you're in a relationship where you can go to a pool hall for 6 hours after work, you're not in an equal partnership.
Yeah.
You need to go back to last week's podcast and work that out.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's funny because a few weeks ago we talked about Jimmy Evans' Marriage on the Rock, right? And they talked about the fundamental needs of women and the fundamental needs of men, right?
Yeah.
So it really illustrates this whole thing perfectly because the fundamental needs for women are like to be listened to have open communication.
Open and honest communication.
All these things, right? Which if you as a husband give that to your wife, you're both going to be better people and everything's going to be good. What are the husband's needs? Domestic support.
So like her doing the dishes.
Yeah, sex on demand. So her needs are fundamental human needs. His needs are a maid and a person to give him sex when he wants it. Like they're not on equal footing.
They're not on the same plane. Yeah, and
it's
so
ridiculous.
Let's ask, what does our marriage need? What is the state of our marriage? And what does our marriage need to thrive?
Yeah, and then all these needs come in. We need open, honest communication. We need deep intimacy. We need to keep the house organized. Yeah. Right? We need to work on our sex lives. We need
to make sure the kids are cared for.
All these things are part of the marriage and what the marriage needs. And when the marriage is strong, we'll both be strong and we'll both be healthy.
Yeah.
If we're working on ourselves and we're working on our marriage, then we do great. But if it's like, I have needs, you better give them to me, then it's counterproductive.
And I think what's happening, and we're going to talk about this in an upcoming podcast about the unfairness threshold that we found in our book in multiple different areas. But in our survey, and our survey was really weighted towards healthier couples. We do have to say that, like, especially our matched pair, the kind of couples that are going to be willing to fill out a matched pair survey are going to be in healthier on the whole, although we still had quite a few unhealthy couples.
We had enough people to find statistically significant differences.
Of everything, right? Yeah. But like, and I'm condensing and I'm generalizing. So this isn't exactly correct, but roughly 50% of marriages are doing great. Like, they really are functioning as partners. You're talking now, you're just referencing right now in terms of household functioning, getting household domestic labor done. Yeah. And that's what you're talking about, right? Not just housework, but like who makes the repair in the marriage if there's a problem, who takes care of the in-laws, like all kinds of different areas.
Sharing the load.
Like on the whole, and the couples that share it in one area tend to share it in all the others, right? Like it's a package deal, right? So there's like 50% of marriages that are doing great. And then there's the 50% where she is putting in a whole lot more work than he is.
Yeah.
And
because of these teachings from our books that the wife is supposed to provide the domestic support for the man because it's a need.
And it's not that there aren't any marriages where he is putting in a lot more support, a lot more work than her. There are some, but it's overwhelming the other way. Yeah. Because like if you look at
society gives men the option to feel okay about that.
They gives them the option to go to the pool hall till 11 at
Whereas
night.
if you're a husband who does that, you get a little bit of a tisk tisk. If you're a wife who does that, that comes down on you pretty hard. Right?
And so here's the issue is that we can't start talking about compromise until we are on an equal playing field.
Right.
Compromise doesn't work if one person is already putting in a whole lot more work than the other. Yeah. And so the issue here is to figure out where are we in terms of, who's doing what in the marriage? How are we feeling?
Yeah.
Not just, well, what is it that you need? What is it that I need? Because we are both equally valid.
Yeah. And we talk about two different ways of visualizing that in our book. The first one is we talk about something called foundations and frills. So if you're looking for a frill, right? Like I'd like us to be more adventurous in bed.
Right.
But she is taking care of 4 kids.
Well, let's keep it with sex because sex is a really good way to explain this.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let's say that you're looking for the frill of I want to get more adventurous and do some kinky stuff. Okay, we want
I wasn't going to put it in that wording, but whatever.
We want to be adventurous. We want to try more things. Okay.
Right. Okay.
And she is like, I just want to have an orgasm.
Yeah.
I'm not even enjoying it.
Exactly.
Or I just want sex not to hurt.
Yeah.
Okay. He's looking for a frill when she doesn't even have her foundations met.
Yeah.
Because foundationally, before you even look at frills when it comes to sex, you have to have the basic foundations, which is, it's pleasurable for both. So it's not hurting her. It's intimate. No one's feeling used. We're feeling emotionally connected. And it's mutual where we both want this.
Yeah.
So until those 3 things are met, you don't get to talk about frills.
Yeah.
Right?
But what do our Christian resources say, right? We have Christian resources we've talked about where women say they feel like they're being used by their husbands. And the authors say, well, he needs it. So you need to give it to him.
Yeah.
So his need for frequency, a frill, is trumps her need to feel like a human being.
Right.
Which is foundational.
Right. Or even,
that is wrong.
Or even her need to have sex not hurt.
Yeah.
Or even his need for frequency trumps her need for orgasm even maybe there's no pain involved, but she's not enjoying it.
If one of you is not getting your foundational needs met, then it's not fair of the other person to be asking for
frills.
Things that are basically frills.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that's one of the concepts we talked about.
Yeah. Another way of looking at it is something that we came up with for chapter 2 of our book called the marriage hierarchy of needs. And we kind of based it on the idea of a psychologist named Maslow, who talked about the hierarchy of needs that humans have. So think of your hierarchy of needs as a pyramid. And the way Maslow put it is like there's certain basic needs on the bottom, right? Like food, shelter, water,
safety, physical safety.
Yeah. And then you move up to, friendship, like nicer things. And then you move up at the top would be self-actualization, right? Like, feeling called, pursuing dreams, spiritual fulfillment. Because, and you can argue where sex goes. There's been a lot of debate of where sex goes on his hierarchy of needs. But basically, no one's worried about sex when you're being chased by a bear, right? So you got to do the basic foundational stuff first, and then you get to move up. And we think the same thing is true of marriage, which means we divide our hierarchy, our pyramid into 3 parts. So the bottom is just surviving. Okay. Like nothing really super good is happening. We're just trying to get through the day.
Yep.
And then once you're over that and you move up, you get to living.
Yeah.
Like, we're actually, enjoying life. We can start paying more attention to what things will make our life better. We're out of that survival mode. And then hopefully what we want for all of us is to move up to thriving.
Yeah.
Where you really feel seen and heard in your marriage. You get to explore all kinds of things. You get to explore your callings. You get rest and rejuvenation, all of these wonderful things, right? So think of those as the 3 tiers. So survival. When you're in the survival mode, what are you worried about?
That's like paying the rent.
Yeah.
Making sure the kids are getting their clothes on and getting out the school to the bus.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, kids need to be fed. People need to be fed. We need to make sure laundry is done. House needs to be livable, not clean or anything. But basically, we're just trying to get through the day.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to get basic needs met. And we're not thriving as individuals or a couple, right? Like we may not be getting enough rest.
Yep.
We're probably not exercising. Like this is just basic survival. Yep. We have no time for ourselves.
And it's hard to be in that sort of a mindset, to be in that sort of a place.
Yeah.
But when you're together, it's easier than when you're apart.
Yes.
When one of you is in that level, and the other person is a level up,
Yes.
that's really tough.
Yeah, because the next level, living, that's when you get to explore, what kind of job do I really want?
Yeah.
Like, what church am I happier with? Like, you get to ask these questions.
Some of your preferences get met.
Yeah, your preferences get met. And then in thriving, it's like you really feel like I am where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the problem is...
get to experience everything life has to offer.
When one person gets to experience everything life has to offer, but they do it at the expense of their spouse, who is now in the survival mode. And the best example of that...
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes it can be that you don't even realize it. You don't realize you're living on a higher level than your spouse.
Yeah.
And that's neglectful, and you should be recognizing that that's the case and trying to help it. But sometimes, exactly like you said, by us trying to move up and get our needs met, we sometimes push our spouse down lower.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, in the story of Brenda and Mark,
Yeah.
if Brenda starts giving Mark more sex, because that's what Mark's asking for,
Yeah.
that's going to kill their sex life.
Yeah.
Because she's going to become increasingly resentful. He's not going to deal with the pornographic style of relating that's causing him to act like this, because he's going to be getting that little itch scratched. So he's not going to be driven to actually do the self-work to be a better man.
Yeah.
And they're going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So if you're living on different levels, you need to get down in the trenches with the person at the lower level
and
and help both of you come up.
Yeah, the best story I ever heard is the life of A.W. Tozer, who is a very famous Christian writer, very contemplative, was apparently a great preacher. But he and his wife had a difficult marriage because he would spend hours and hours and hours in prayer and meditation. Didn't spend any time with the kids. Didn't even recognize some of the kids. Like he was not an involved father at all. He really believed in giving all the money back to the church. So they lived in poverty, which was fine for him as he walked to work. But his wife had to wrangle like 6 kids on public transit, do grocery shopping and everything. It was really difficult for her. And he died early. She remarried. And someone once asked her, how do you feel about your husbands? And her reply was, Aiden loved Jesus, but Leonard loves me. Yeah. And I thought that was so telling. Aiden loved Jesus, but Leonard loves me. You don't want to be the kind of spouse that someone would say that about.
Well, and even Paul, what Paul talks about, the married man, is concerned about the things of the earth, how he can please his wife.
Yeah.
I think it's lovely that people want to serve God, but the Bible itself says if you're in a marriage, then you have a primary responsibility to your spouse.
You do.
Right? And that's God-given, right?
Yeah.
So
but so often what's happening is that they aren't on an even playing field, and one person gets to live this much easier life at the expense of the other. Yeah. And that's what Emerson Eggerichs didn't see.
Right.
And that's why these women were reacting to that.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he already has it really good. We need to get back. The women were saying, we need to get to an even playing field.
Right.
And that's not there. Right. And I asked on our patron group about some examples of, where women are being asked to do way more than men are in marriage, and it's imbalanced. And someone sent me these quotes from Power of a Praying Wife, which are so good. So this is the book by Stormy Omartian. I don't know how you say her last name. Is it? Okay.
I think so, Omartian.
Anyway, sold like 10 million copies. Super best-selling book that's used in Bible studies. We've done a number of podcasts on it, and I have a one-sheet download about all the problems with it. It scored very badly on our healthy sexuality rubric, and we talk about it in the Great Sex Rescue. But I want to read you this, okay? So she writes, even if you, the wife, are the only one working and your husband stays home to keep house and tend to the kids, you will still be expected to see that the heart of your home is a peaceful sanctuary, a source of contentment, acceptance, rejuvenation, nurturing, rest, and love for your family. On top of this, you will also be expected to be sexually appealing, a good cook, a great mother, physically, emotionally, and spiritually fit. It's overwhelming to most women, but the good news is that you don't have to do it all on your own. You can seek God's help. This is unironic.
Yeah. So the context is she's talking about how this is the way it is for women. If you're a woman, even if your husband is at home and you're the one earning the money, you still have to do all these things. Be appealing, be sexually appealing to him, create a home of a haven of peace for him, all this stuff. Yep. She's saying all this stuff unironically. Yeah, this reminds me of the America Ferrera speech from the Barbie movie. So, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the Barbie movie, But basically all the Barbies get caught up in patriarchy and they're all serving the men and losing all their ability to actually function as adults. And they say this to women and they snap out and they go, oh yeah, that's not fair. That's not right. And it snaps them out of this.
Yeah.
She'd be immune. She thinks that that's normal. She thinks this is just what it's supposed to be like for women.
Yeah.
And that's like no sense of the injustice of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then she goes on to say, oh, and then I love that bit, you can do it with God's help, never with your husband's help. So your husband is staying at home. Even if you work and he's looking after the home, remember that the home is still your responsibility to do it.
Because if your husband helps you, then you're kind of like not doing your job.
Yeah, anyway. And then she says, if your husband is a hard worker, make sure he has times of rest and enjoyment to do things that entertain him and give him a reprieve from the weight of a lifetime of supporting a family. Men need periods of refreshing. If they don't have them, they are prone to burnout and temptations of all kinds.
Right. Okay. So, women, apparently you don't need times of refreshing and relaxation.
Right. Even though women suffer from stress at twice the rate of men in today's society.
It's crazy. So men need this.
Yeah. But women don't.
Like, why can't we just talk about human needs?
I know.
Right? Because it's the whole point is to set it up to be unfair. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the whole point. Is the reason we set up that these are men's needs, these are women's needs, is so that we can maintain an unfair system.
Yeah.
Because if we just said there are human needs and some of them are more pressing than others, some of them are survival level, some of them are living level, and some of them are thriving level, and we should evaluate those as a couple, and we should work together so that we both get all of our needs and the needs of the marriage met. Yeah. Wouldn't that be a lot healthier?
It would be.
But the problem is we'd have to give up all the benefits of men getting what they want.
Yes. And
wouldn't
that's
that be a shame?
That's unacceptable. So then, so as we've in chapter 2 of The Marriage You Want, we talk about this, about how compromise isn't the answer, and how we gave you this tool of the marriage hierarchy of needs, and we're basically saying, look, your marriage exists on the lowest tier that one of the spouses is on. So like if one of you is enjoying tier 3 benefits, like you get to have the rest and reprieve, you get to do what you feel is your calling at work, like A.W. Tozer did. You get all these things, but your spouse is in the survival mode. Your marriage is in the survival mode, right? Like your marriage is at the lower level, whichever the lowest level is that you both are at. And the solution is for both of you to get to that level. And then both of you work hard at that level so that you can help.
And to be aware of where your spouse is actually at. Like the number of times we've heard from people who like went to a marriage conference. And the husband's response was, well, I don't really want to go, but she wants me to, so I guess I'd better. And then come to find out the wife went with the attitude of, if this doesn't work, I'm done. And he had no clue. Like he was going, oh, well, whatever, let's just go. He had no clue that she was on the brink. Right? Because he's just not paying attention. And it happens the other way too sometimes. Sometimes it's wives that are not realizing how much their husband is giving to the relationship. And they're unaware of that. And if you want to be a team, you need to realize, you need to check in with each other. Where are you? What level are you in right now? Because I want to be there with you.
Okay, side note here about marriage conferences. I get so many DMs asking, hey, our church is hosting this marriage conference. Is it a toxic one? And most of them I've never heard of, so I can't tell you. But what I will tell you is go back and listen to the podcast from 2 weeks ago where we talked about the 5-point plan that most evangelical marriage resources have, and that explains why the advice is toxic. And basically, when you start from a faulty premise, then all kinds of other toxic things follow from that in order to support the toxic premise, and they lead to negative outcomes. And if the marriage conference is built on that faulty premise, which I would say 95% of evangelical marriage conferences are, then it's not going to be a helpful conference. So that's just my take, whatever conference it is. Okay, so we have a concept that I think explains why A.W. Tozer thought he could be in tier 3 while his wife was in survival mode, and that this was okay. And that concept is entitlement. And we're going to bring on Joanna to have our little stats corner with Joanna about entitlement. We are back with another stats moment with Joanna. Hello, Joanna.
Hi, everybody.
So let's talk about entitlement. Because we measured that.
So we didn't actually quite measure entitlement because that would be quite difficult to do. We measured all sorts of other things that are obviously going to be extremely correlated with entitlement. The problem was that to measure entitlement, it would be a lot easier to do it if we had interview data, because a lot of it is not just about behavior, it's about intent. And that gets tricky to do with multiple choice questions.
Yes.
But what we did measure is one of my favorite questions, and you can tell it's my favorite question because it shows up in every book we will ever do. We will always have this question. But it's spouses who believe that their opinions don't matter as much as their spouses, right? And obviously, if you don't think your opinions matter as much as your spouses do in your marriage, then bad things happen.
Right.
To the shock of
Right.
0 people. Okay.
Right.
That's what we showed over and over again is a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But this time, we got to take it up a notch because we didn't just measure women or just measure men. And we didn't also just measure men and women. We did a matched pair survey.
Right.
Woo! And we have been talking about this as a group since, I think, 2019.
You've been very excited.
Yes.
I've been very excited
Yes.
about this because what you do in a matched pair survey is you match people up. You pair them, right? It's matched pair. So you're looking at wives and their husbands.
Yes.
Or a matched pair survey could also be looking at, somebody, you take their blood work on January 1st, and then you look at that same person's blood work on April 1st, right? That would also be a matched pair data from a statistical perspective. But in our case, we looked at married couples and we matched them up. And we were able to do that. And then to compare, if one of them says, my opinions don't matter as much as my spouse's in my marriage, what does the other person say?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I thought it was really neat how you did this because you actually managed to match people, but keep all the data anonymized still because everyone took the survey still. Everything was anonymous. Nobody knew what anybody else said.
Yep.
And that's
I didn't have anybody's email because I didn't want people to be, we're asking such intimate stuff. We didn't want people to be worried that, that we were going to be able to identify them and then change their answers because observer bias is a real thing when it comes to survey research. Anyway,
and the spouses also didn't know how each other answered.
Yeah, that's what I was.
So that was the big thing because you don't have to be scared that like my husband's going to know.
Be honest.
Yeah.
You just say what the reality is. Yeah.
Yep. So if one spouse believed that their opinions don't matter as much as their spouses, the other spouse was 2.8 times more likely to also believe that their opinions don't matter as much as their spouses.
Yeah.
Right.
So we had a lot of marriages where both people cared more about their own opinions, but also their spouse cared more about their opinions.
So then they feel that their spouse cares more about, it creates this, again, a cycle.
Okay. So we explain what we think that means in the marriage you want, but Keith and I are now going to talk about it together.
Yes.
So thank you, Joanna.
Thanks, Joanna.
Okay. So why is it that if you feel your opinions aren't being heard in marriage, your spouse is so much more likely to also say that their opinions are not heard in marriage?
Right.
Did two selfish people just happen to marry each other? Is that what's going on?
Well, it's possible. I mean, I think the other thing too is that if you're the kind of person who has an overinflated idea of what you deserve in the marriage, you're going to feel like you're not getting your share, even when you're getting more than your share.
Like Mark.
Like Mark,
the Mark and
right?
Brenda story.
Yeah, it's like that whole thing when you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression.
Yeah,
right. That concept. If you're used to getting more, and now you're expected to be a true equal partner, that's going to feel like you're being asked to pull more than your share because it's a lot more than you're used to doing.
Yeah,
but you're actually just being asked to do your share.
Yeah, and a lot of us feel like we shouldn't have to work for something. Like we are entitled to something.
Yeah. There's a reason why I don't have to do that.
I don't have to. There's a reason why I get these benefits that my spouse will provide me, even if I don't do any work. Yeah. And we can have all kinds of reasons for feeling entitled. Some of them are deeply psychological. Like I had such a terrible childhood. I am owed, like the universe owes me. God owes me. Like I am owed a great marriage. I am owed not having to work so much because I worked so much in the past. Or another one might be, God promised me that I would be able to do this, or, I feel a real calling from God for this. So you can't not give it to me because then you're going against God.
Yeah. And I think a lot with sex, that becomes a big thing with a lot of evangelical teaching too, right? The concept, this purity culture message that if you abstain before you're married, when you're married, God will give you the sex life of your dreams.
Yeah.
And then you get married and you actually have to work those things out. And it's like you feel robbed that I'm not getting what I want. And so instead of saying, oh, I guess this is going to be harder, we've got to have to work on this together as a couple, it's like, I married you because it was going to be amazing and you're going to fix my porn problem. And you're not, you feel like you're hard done by.
Yeah. Because you're not getting what God,
right?
But it can even be in other areas, like even something like homeschooling.
Right.
And we talked about this in the marriage you want to, we gave this as an example.
Story,
is, some people feel really called by God to homeschool. and I was homeschooled, or maybe I wasn't, but I always wanted to, and I want to give my kids the best, and so we need to homeschool, but the finances aren't there for you to do it, or there could be all kinds of reasons. And so, like, yes, you might feel called to this, but if it's not practically working for your family, like, the rent still does need to get paid. Yeah. Right. So
and this is a lot of these, like, sort of gendered tropes that we have in the church too. Like, the man's supposed to provide and the wife's supposed to give, submit to him and all that kind of stuff. So therefore men get entitled because they feel they have a right to their house being cleaned for them. Yes. That kind of stuff. But women also feel like, well, I'm the stay-at-home mom. I have the right. He should be making more money. He should be providing better for us. Yes. Like, you can each get into entitlement.
Yeah, and even just in our society, I'm entitled to a nice car, a nice house. Like, we're all entitled to all of these things, right? And so what's wrong with my life if I don't get them?
Where if you were a team, you wouldn't have that problem as much because you'd be checking each other's entitlement.
Right, exactly. But when we have these entitlements, it actually makes us treat our spouse badly. Yeah. And that's the point that we're trying to make here. Because if you believe...
And you don't even realize that. Yes. You think you're the one that's hard done by.
Yes.
As you're being unfair to your spouse. You still feel like you're suffering.
Yeah, so Mark goes out and plays pool till 11 p.m.,
and feels sorry for himself.
And feels sorry for himself because Brenda was mad at him about about not calling the babysitter. Yeah. Right. And Brenda didn't understand what he was going through. Yeah. But meanwhile, he's leaving Brenda with the kids. Like, that's major entitlement, right?
Yeah. It's so much easier to live in that sense of entitlement than to actually, look inside and go, like, am I being unfair here?
Am I the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I the problem? And, oh no, wait, are we the baddies? Where does that come from? Are we the baddies?
That's
Blackadder?
No, it's not Laurie and Fry and Laurie. It's Webb. It's a British comedian.
Webb guy. Yeah.
David Webb says it.
Yeah. Are we the baddies?
Yeah.
But like that's we need to ask ourselves that, because all of us can be prone to, this is going to bother you now, isn't it?
Yeah. Mitchell and Webb.
Mitchell and Webb.
That Mitchell and Webb thing.
Yes. But all of us can be prone to entitlement. And so we need to watch, and the results of entitlement usually are one of us is living on a higher tier and pushing the other one down.
Yeah.
So the thing that we think that we're owed is pushing the other one down.
Yeah.
So that we can enjoy a higher tier, but we think we're owed this.
Yeah. And that can happen to either people. But the problem is that when you have a belief system which says that men are supposed to be above women and women are supposed to not confront men, you're creating an environment where entitlement can thrive for men.
Yeah.
So that when people then call men out on being entitled, they get called anti-men, which is what was happening with Egrich.
Yes.
Right? He's coming from a position of entitlement. I'm entitled to, when we're having an argument, you to just shut up and do what I tell you.
Yeah.
I feel entitled to do that. And why won't you do that, woman? What is wrong with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, instead of saying, well, I'm being kind of entitled.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm entitled to leave wet towels on the bed, and I get to call my wife disrespectful if she calls me out for it.
Yeah.
So, exactly. So why is it that when one person feels like their opinions don't matter, the other person often does as well? It's because the entitled person is making it so that their spouse,
my thermostat of what I deserve is set wrong.
Exactly. Right? So let me give you another example. So we did the Mark and Brenda story. Here's a perfect encapsulation from the book Intended for Pleasure, which is one of the earliest sex books in Christendom. We looked at this one for the Great Sex Rescue too, and a quote: "When you are not having intercourse as frequently as you were prior to pregnancy, you should offer manual stimulation to him, particularly during the period of abstention." Yeah. So, hey, ladies, when you're puking, make sure that you're still giving him...
You just pushed a human out your hoo-ha.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure that you are still giving him manual stimulation, because what really matters here is not your well-being as you are birthing another human being. What really matters is that he ejaculates as frequently as he did earlier. Right? So his entitlement to ejaculation is greater than your need for rest, etc. Now, I am not saying there is anything wrong with giving a gift during pregnancy if you want to do that. I think it's so much better to figure out how you can each have fun during pregnancy. But this idea that she should do it is really harmful.
And again, like, let's interrogate our Christian faith when the Bible talks about like after like having a baby, there's a long period of time where you're not supposed to even touch her.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
This is in our Bible, right?
In the Old Testament.
Paul talks about abstaining. Like Paul talks about being single for your whole life if you can do it, because that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
Right? And we get from that to, I can't go 6 weeks after a baby because God made men that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe our Christian faith is focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, here's another example of entitlement.
Right.
And this one I want to go into in a little bit more detail is, and this is found throughout Love and Respect. Like Emerson Eggers talks about this over and over and over again in so many different chapters. But it's the idea that because a husband must be willing to die for his wife.
Oh, yes.
Therefore, his wife should give him all of these things.
Yes.
And it especially shows up in his chapters on hierarchy and authority.
Yeah.
Okay. So because a husband must be willing to die for his wife, he gets to be in hierarchy over her and he gets authority over her.
Yeah. So this is what I see this all the time, right? They're like women out there, you don't want to submit to your husbands. Don't you know that your husband would take a bullet for you? Mm-hmm. You know, your husband would lay his life on the line for you in a second.
Yes.
So why won't you give him submission now, women? Like I hear that all the time. And it's like, okay, so his theoretical possible sacrifice one day now demands your practical continuous sacrifice every day.
Yeah.
That's what it's saying. And that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. Here, let me just read you.
What'd you find there?
Okay, I'm going to read you an excerpt.
Okay.
This is a bit of a longer passage from Love and Respect. He says this: a man who has basic goodwill will serve his wife and even die for her. There is no expectation of the wife to die for her husband. Of course, there are wives who might push the point a bit. You may have heard the story about the woman who told her husband, "Oh, Harry, you keep saying you die for me, but you never do." That's just a story, of course, designed to get a smile or a laugh, but it isn't funny when men who are willing to die for their wives are treated with contempt and no respect. One woman wrote to me to confess, although a Bible student for most of my life and a very spiritual person, I had given up. But then I read your statement that says, though there is more to love than dying for someone, it is a sad day when a man knows that he'd die for his wife because he loves her, yet he hears her continually complain, "You don't love me." The truth hit me powerfully in my spirit, like no other thing has hit me concerning our marriage. I felt the kind of shame one feels when she knows she has done terribly wrong, and she knows not even to ask for forgiveness, and she knows that this one thing will take a long time to heal, but she knows this is one thing she won't do again. And then he comments, "This lady gets it."
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So,
so women, I'm so horrible. I shouldn't even ask for forgiveness. She gets it.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like, let's talk about all the heresy in that, but whatever.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
But here's the most basic part of this whole thing. Who is most likely to die for the family?
Yeah. Historically, globally, through the entire course of human history, who has died for the family more? Right?
She has.
Yeah.
Because pregnancy is dangerous.
Yeah. Historically.
Yeah,
over time. Things are better now. But if you think about,
but even
the
now,
vast majority of human history.
and I know many of you listening to this are pregnant. You know what?
Don't freak out.
Don't freak out. You're going to do great. Most of us do, overwhelmingly majority of us do. But pregnancy is a more dangerous part of your life. And even if you don't die, your body can still completely change. I couldn't walk for 6 weeks after Becca was born. My younger daughter couldn't walk for longer than that after she had her baby this year. Like pregnancy is dangerous. And historically and worldwide, it kills women. So who is it that dies for their family and that puts their bodies on the line
and how
for
many
their
men,
family all the time?
And how many men in this day and age are going to have a call to actually physically die for their wife?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I said earlier, it theoretically might happen. So you need to serve me continuously every day.
Yeah.
Come on.
Because,
give me a break. That's crazy.
I might one day have to die for you. Well, you need to die for me every day.
Because I feel in my heart I would die for you. Therefore, you should give this to me. Yeah. But hold on a second. If you really honestly would die for this person, why can't you put the towels in the hamper yourself?
Yeah. Why can't you pick up your wet towels, Emerson?
I would die for you. I just can't abstain from sex for 6 weeks with you.
Yeah.
When you have a baby.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How sincere is that?
Yeah. Okay, let me read you some more of what he said.
Oh, I'm going to get even angrier then.
Yeah. This is how the chapter on hierarchy opens.
Yeah.
Okay. Another desire God built into the man is to protect and provide for his wife and family, and if necessary, to die for them. This desire to protect and provide is part of the warp and woof of a man. An obvious example is life insurance. In the United States alone, billions upon billions are spent on life insurance premiums bought mostly by men. Why? Because of their instinct to provide. They feel a sense of security and restfulness knowing their families will be taken care of if they die.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so because of this, he gets to be in hierarchy over her. And then he says, the problem many women have today, including Christian wives, is that they want to be treated like a princess, but deep down they resist treating their husbands like the king.
This is what drives me crazy because, this whole idea of like being a provider and a protector, I think that really does resonate with a lot of men. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of men do really feel that.
Yeah.
And guys like Emerson Eggerichs have destroyed it for us.
Yeah.
Because they've used that as a justification to put themselves in authority over and control and dominate women. Yeah. So women have now learned protect and provide are dangerous words. Mm-hmm. Protect and provide are words. If a man uses those words, I need to be scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
It makes me so upset.
Well, and who is it that women need protection from anyway? It's other men. So how about you change the culture? The best way that men could protect women is to change the culture.
If you want to protect,
so that it isn't so dangerous to women. We know what makes church dangerous to women. Women and girls who grow up in churches that speak modesty messages are more likely to be sexually assaulted in those churches. So if you want to protect your daughters from sexual assault, you will push back against the modesty message.
Yep.
Like if you're really truly interested in protecting women, then push back against the messages that hurt women.
Yeah. Including that men are supposed to be over top of women by God's design.
Like, listen to this. And this is in the authority chapter again, the question to wives, have I gone on record that because he has the primary responsibility for me, even to die for me, that I recognize him as having primary authority over me? Do I let him be the leader? Mm-hmm. So, because he is responsible to die for me, even though I am more likely to die for him, right? Do I let him be my authority? Mm-hmm. And it's like, this is all so backwards. Yeah. It's all so backwards. And this leads to entitlement. Yeah. It really does. Instead
of having a relationship which is built on partnership and teamwork.
Mm-hmm. And then at the end of chapter 2, we ask, like, how do you get out of the entitlement mindset? And over again, what we found in the peer-reviewed literature on how to defeat entitlement is that you approach marriage with a teamwork mindset. Yeah. So instead of asking, what do I need? We say, what is the state of our marriage? And what does our marriage need right now? Yeah. And that's what we're asking people to do, is stop thinking in terms of compromise. What does he need? What do I need? And start thinking in terms of, where is our marriage honestly at? Mm-hmm. Where are we living on that hierarchy of needs? Who's on what tier? And what can we do to make sure that we both get to live and even eventually thrive? Mm-hmm. How do we get there? So let's start taking an honest look at us as partners, as teammates, instead of all this craziness. Because it is craziness.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is craziness.
Better for men, better for women, better for families.
Yeah.
Better for the world.
Yeah. And guys, if you want to take your wife out to dinner, make sure you call the babysitter. Just arrange for babysitter. Super easy. Thank you. So thank you for joining us on the Bare Marriage Podcast. Please be sure to pre-order the marriage you want. It helps us so much. Pre-orders help us. If you're going to get it anyway, order it now. Yeah. Because that makes sure that Amazon has enough in stock so that when it does go crazy on launch day, they don't run out. Mm-hmm. It means that other bookstores will buy it because other bookstores look at what is the top new releases in all the different categories. Yep. And they tend to put stuff in stock that's near the top. So the more you pre-order, the more other bookstores will buy it, and the more people will see the book. So you really help get the word out, and you can be our partners in this.
Yep. And you're gonna love it.
You are. It's an awesome book, The Marriage You Want. It's like Great Sex Rescue, but on steroids. And we're just
except that it's much more positive.
Yeah, we're not really.
It's not about tearing things down. It's just about like, hey, let's start with good Christian principles about, mutual service and golden rule stuff.
Yeah, and then build together a healthy relationship from the ground up. And it's a super fun book. I think you'll love it. And it comes with a study guide as well, which has premarital curriculum, small group curriculum, questions to work through with your spouse.
The study guide is awesome. It's got some like the personal growth exercises in it are just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. So take a look at the study guide as well. And we will be back here next week as we look at another aspect of the marriage you want. and take a look at the podcast notes as well for all the links that we mentioned. We'll see you later.
Bye.